Then, 8 years later, it happened again. There'd been signs of spontaneous combustion at Moura No. 2, so, just as had happened more than 20 times in the past, it was decided to seal the affected panel. 512 panel was sealed. The atmosphere in the sealed-off area became explosive in the first 24 hours, again normal under the circumstances. So the Sunday shift, just before midnight, went ahead, despite the slowly rising gas levels.
And I said to the bloke that was standing beside me, which was John Owens, he was one of the ones with us, and I said, I don't think we should be going down here. And he said, why? I said, it's in an explosive range. And he said, oh, they don't worry about that, we're on a different air system now, they've got, different... I said, oh yeah. And nobody come near us, and I thought, well, surely somebody else is going to say something about it, but we have safety officers here, deputies, and when the time come to start, everybody just jumped in the road, and I said, well, I must be the only stupid bugger here about whinging about it. So we went down, and I think it was 11:35 or 11:25, she went bang. When it happened, we called out to each other, it just, the noise, I don't know, you'd never heard a noise like it in your life. It just sounded like if the mine started falling from the surface and just proceeded to go down, and as it built up, the momentum, the noise, and blew all the bag down beside me and blew me about 12 feet across the road, and I landed on my hands and knees, lost my glasses.
One team, 11 men, were trapped in the mine. 13 others, Jim Parsons and his team and one other sole miner, did make their way to safety, a 45-minute journey in fear of their lives in utter darkness.
Probably our adrenaline took over and knew that we had to get out of that pit. We used the knowledge of the mine because we couldn't see.
Yeah, it was. That's all you could see in front of you. And we had quartz halogen lights in the back of the rover, and the rover behind, which was following us, nearly ran up the back of us twice because he couldn't even see it. He said it was just like a cigarette glow in the dark. And one bloke couldn't get his nose clipped to stop on with his self-rescue, so he had to sit there all the way up, holding his nose with the self-rescue of it. Then as we proceeded up, the only way we got out was when we hit the rib on that side. Of course, it was stone dust, when we got right up against it, you could see we were bit by the light. Then if we hit the rib on the other side, we just went that way, all the way up till we got...
So you're literally bouncing off the walls?
Walls, to get up to where we were. Sat in the road, and I thought, well, this is it. I'm not going to get out of here. I won't see the kids or the wife again. I reckon I'm going to put the old head between the arse, legs and kiss my ass goodbye, because this is it. But everybody stood up for some reason, I don't know, and it was a very low section. We only probably had about 10 foot high. And when everybody stood up on the back of the road, we were only probably that far from the roof. And they had a water and air line walking, tied to the roof for the run of the machines in the airline and that. And then the lights hit that. We knew where we were then, so we backed up and turned the rovers. I got out and walked till we hit the main dip, and the only reason we knew we were in the main dip, they had one of them big vision mirrors that were for going around the corner, you can see what's coming around, and the lights hit that and we straightened up. We knew we had a chance then.
When you finally reached the surface, most of us bent down and probably touched the ground to say that we were actually out of the mine. But certain areas, I looked at my watch to find out what time, if we were going to die, exactly what time we were going to die. I thought about my wife at that stage, what she'd go through if we didn't survive that trip out.
At 12:20, a huge cloud of smoke billowed into the sky. Another explosion had rocked the area surrounding the mine shaft where the 11 workers are trapped. National 9 News reporter Warren Clark was on standby to report into the midday show when this explosion occurred.
It was a great plume that came up, went about 200 or maybe 100 metres into the air, and just lasted, I suppose, for about 3 minutes, and then stopped, vaporised, and then began to blow away with the wind.
That was the second blast at Moura No. 2 mine, and it sealed the fate of 11 men trapped underground.
13 years on, and like so many others, I'll never forget that terrible day. and knew immediately what had happened, of course, but because the show was going live back into Moura, where so many families were watching, and I had to choose my words carefully. The pictures, of course, were devastating enough. But in reality, we all knew that everything and everyone was lost the moment that the earth shook from that terrible second explosion.
We went out there all that night again next night. Come home again, and I was sleeping. About midday, my wife come and wake me up and said, "There's a big black cloud over where number 4 was." I broke down, and I knew then that we'd never get them out, because after that one, that was, you know, there's no chance. There was no chance before of getting them being alive, but there was a chance that we could have retrieved the bodies. But after the second bang, no.
So what's that sadness like of leaving the boys behind?
Well, mate, I can tell you, it just about sent me off the track. That's why I took voluntary redundancy. I'd lost it. If I hadn't have got out, I would have done something stupid. I was that convinced I would have. And I was just lucky I had a good woman. Of course, if any other one that wasn't as strong as her would have left me, I'm quite sure of that.
Those first couple of weeks, every day I'd sit out in the front step. My wife would come out and ask me questions, and all I could answer was, "I don't know what's going on." I just shrugged my shoulders, and that affected me because we didn't have a future at that stage.
Is that what it was? It simply robbed you of a future?
It robbed us of a future. It robbed us of a lot of things. My relationship with my wife sort of busted up a little bit. After that, once we found out that we were going somewhere, things got a little bit better.
Moura was a town where almost every life was touched by the loss of the 36 men at the coalface. There's a gap in so many families now, something missing, something that will never ever be right.
Some of the men were involved in multiple disasters, or lived through one to die in the next. But the survivors suffer too.
I set myself a personal goal as a manager never to have a fatality. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, and a guy who was a personal friend worked for me and died in a rockfall, and it became a bit of a journey for me after that. Very passionate about how I could improve safety.
I joined Mines Rescue just after that, and I worked for Mines Rescue for the next 16 years.
Yeah, she basically dedicated your life to making sure it doesn't happen again.
Yep, yeah. Basically dedicated my life to make sure it was, well, if anybody got caught up in a situation like that, that they could self-rescue and help their mates.
To my metalliferous time, I recall at times when there were people injured on my watch, and it just stuck with me so strongly. It was so profound to see people injured permanently that it just, you can't describe it in any other term than just a profound change in my view on life.
With Moura, because as an underground working environment, everybody knew everybody, and it was a loss of workmates, it was a loss of a way of living as an underground person. Underground compared to open cut, you're a lot more friendlier and you know each other, so you've lost your workmates. After the explosion, when all the memorials happened, that was a pretty sad time going to every one of those. You were physically drained and emotionally worn out from that for the first couple of months, into just your whole world was turned upside down, and it took a long time to get your life back on track. One of my biggest regrets, when we had to go to the inquiry at Gladstone, you were meeting a lot of the widows that you actually knew, and their husbands wasn't there, and you were actually appearing in the inquiry. And one of the things that got me, after you've lost somebody, you send people sympathy cards. I got those sympathy cards, but I never ever sent them. They stayed in a drawer at my home. So
You just couldn't send them?
no, it was just too hard. Still too hard now.
It's changed me a lot in that I think probably Cleanga probably had the biggest change in me, but the other mines as well. I thought if only people could see, you know, the grief of the families and the suffering that those people who survived there, you know, who didn't get killed in the mine, but who survived it, the suffering they do afterwards. I mean, I know, without mentioning names, some of the blokes that survived at number 2 and that, and they still have a lot of difficulty with it. A lot of difficulty. It's very hard. I mean, even I say hard for me to talk about it 30 odd years after. It's a terrible thing.